All right, let us discuss Tennessee, Georgia a little further. This is your Tennessee, Georgia preview presented by Prize Picks. If you're not playing Prize Picks already, what are you doing? Download that app. Use the code STAPLES. You play $5, you get $50 instantly. You're picking squares. You've got a player attached to a stat category, and obviously we talk about college football here, but they've got NBA. They've got NBA. I said NBA. I said NFL. They've got darts sometimes. They've got esports almost all the time. Whatever people are playing, you can find some squares on Prize Picks, but the Tennessee-Georgia game is the one we want to talk about. Let's look at Nico Iamaleava, who is, as we said, questionable on the availability report. So 188.5 passing yards. Do you think he'll throw for more of that or less than that? And my initial thought, Ari, is this is a very low number. When I look at what Nico's done this season, I'm like, no, this is actually pretty much right on the screws.
Yeah. Also, too, this is a very challenging square because, A, there is some uncertainty about whether he's going to play, right? So you're taking that inherent risk. But then also, too, when you're talking about a head injury, of all the injuries that could pop up during the game again with one bad player, one weird hit to remove them from the game, that's the one, right? Like if you had a head injury or a big hit the week before and then you take another pop to the head, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to come out of the game. So like I personally would advise people to maybe not play that square because there's nothing better or nothing worse than having the right idea and losing on a technicality. So maybe I guess if they're going to offer it, just go less than, because they're probably not going to put him in a harm's way a bunch, but at the same time too, it's like you also don't want to be like, oh, it'd be great if he came out of the game. Like it's just not a fun square to play this week.
Well, let's look at Dylan Samson because, like we said before, he's kind of been the engine that drives Tennessee's offense, and he's one of those that I feel like has performed relatively consistently. I'm not as worried so much about Dylan Samson himself. I'm worried about, can Dylan Samson's performance stay similar against a defense that is probably better than what they've seen against the run. So if we look at Dylan Samson, his rushing yardage number is 89.5 yards. And he has gone more than 89.5 yards each of the past 5 games. In fact, the lowest yardage output each of the past 5 games for Dylan Samson is Florida with 112. He's been 139, 140, 142, 149. He has been really consistent. But he's now playing against a defense that is very good against the run. Now, Georgia's probably not as good as they have been against the run. They're still really good, though. They are number 18 in the country in terms of yards per carry allowed. It's only 3.35. They just got through playing Ole Miss, which is number 1 in the country. So Tennessee is number 5, by the way. And we're going to talk about Trevor Etienne in a second. But can Dylan Samson stay consistent against a defense that is much better at stopping the run than the ones he's seen?
Yeah, well, I actually think that this is a pretty interesting spot because the thought process, I think, even if Nico were 100% healthy, would be that they would lean on the running a game. I think that of all the things that we know definitively that Tennessee does well offensively, what their identity has been this year, it is Dylan Samson running and scoring a lot. Like he has scored a ton. So to me, with the uncertainty of Nico, I feel like they're going to have to pound him, even if they're going to have to stick with it, even if it's not working early or Georgia, plug some holes, get some big stops. Like, I don't think that it's something that Tennessee can ever afford to get away from. Like, I think that that's going to be part of their game plan the entire game. And if you've watched Tennessee play, like Dylan Samson is going to get his. Like, I don't care how good Georgia's defensive line is. Like if Ashton Genty didn't exist, Dylan Samson might be one of the biggest stars in the sport this year. So like I cannot understate how good he is, and getting a number less than 100 seems like a pretty awesome situation, especially considering the fact that Tennessee knows that it might have to rely on him even more than they have in the past with the quarterback situation.
Yeah, and really with this number 89.5, if he breaks one long one, you're probably going to get it. So let's move to the other side of the field. Let's look at Trevor Etienne, who is also questionable for this game. And his number is 51.5, and he's not been able to hit that the last few weeks. Now, remember, they've been playing some really good run defenses, specifically Ole Miss, which gives up 2.2 yards a carry. But Tennessee is number 5 in the country in yards per carry run defense, 2.8. They do not give up much on the ground. We don't know if Trevor Etienne's healthy. Like I said, it feels like he's been on a pitch count. This feels like a less than for me, Ari.
Yeah, I'm with you, especially because Nate Frazier's been carrying the ball a ton. I don't know. I think that Frazier led Georgia in carries last week, didn't he?
He did. Etienne only had 6 carries last week.
Yeah. Also, too, I cannot believe people think that like Tennessee is not going to win. Like maybe they're not, but like Tennessee, there's so much to like about
a path for Georgia to win. It's just a low scoring game. Like, yeah,
for Georgia to beat the Bengals. I'm just saying, like, I think that there's a realistic, like, I think it's just the way we're viewing the game. I don't know if it's just me and you. It seems like the entire country is just kind of falling back on the notion that Georgia could not lose 2 in a row. And I think it is possible when you're playing 2 teams that have the defenses that they have, especially up front. Like, this is a very challenging spot. So I like less than because Tennessee's defense is awesome. I don't know how they make this up. I guess like you could just go all in on Frazier.
And that brings us to our pal Carson Beck, which he'd be the one who has to do it. And I'm just not sure he's going to do it. But watching him against Ole Miss, and again, Tennessee's defense and Ole Miss are pretty similar. Ole Miss is probably a little better, but their numbers are pretty similar. Ole Miss leads the nation in tackles for loss per game at 10.3. Tennessee is number 8 at 7.9. Like, they're really good at stopping the run. They're really good at pressuring the quarterback. They're really good at tackling people in the backfield. Carson Beck's number in this game is 261.5. He did not go more than that against Ole Miss. He did against Florida, but only because they were in a tight game and he had to throw their way out of 3 interceptions that he'd already thrown. He threw 3 picks against Texas. He took care of the ball better in the air against Ole Miss, but he did fumble a little bit as well. So they're going to have to get a game from Carson Beck that has to look like a game we haven't seen, except maybe the Alabama game.
Yeah. And maybe being at home, Andy, is going to be a huge difference for him because playing on the road against that pass rush in an environment like that is a really tough situation. But like, is the best pass rusher in the entire sport on Tennessee's defensive line?
Entirely possible. It's James Pierce. Yeah, it's possible.
I have a feeling that he would be the number 1 pick.
Yeah, and he probably will be the first one off the board in the draft next year. I don't know if he'll be number 1 in the draft, but the first edge rusher off the board. So that is look, this is going to be a fun game because I do think people are making a lot of assumptions about Georgia. Well, it's Georgia. But I got to tell you, somebody I trust sent me a text yesterday that goes, this is going to be a Kirby game. Yeah. And you know what that means.
And
it's where Georgia's defense just absolutely dominates, causes Tennessee to make mistakes, sets up points for Georgia. It's the Texas game, essentially, the Georgia-Texas game.
Yeah, that's a Kirby game. Yeah, that's.
And I was like, you know what? I can see that.
I don't think that there's ever Here's the thing. If Georgia actually isn't what they've been, or they come back down to earth to being like everybody else, then you'll know that because then you'll be like, I can't see the Kirby game. Like you can, I see the Kirby game every week. Like, I don't care who Georgia's playing. Like the Kirby game is always right here in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
You know, I'm more easily able to doubt that the Kirby game shows up because I think that the issues that Georgia is illustrating are personnel related and not mindset related. Yeah. And I think that Tennessee has an opportunity to take advantage of some of the personnel situations that Georgia has at play here, which is, you know, lack of explosive offensive playmakers. The running game isn't the type of game that or situation that can just run people down or run the ball down your throat. Carson Beck has been throwing turnovers. Like, I don't know, like real tangible issues offensively is not something that I wash away with, oh, it's going to be a Kirby game. Now, if it's a Kirby game because the defense just like Tennessee has 11 yards in the third quarter, and it looks a lot like the Texas game did, then that's the defense. But like, I think that Tennessee's defense is going to be good enough to keep them in this game, even if that Georgia defense shows up and makes things really difficult on Nico and Samson.
Yeah, that's the part, because Ole Miss was moving the ball on Georgia's defense. They weren't hitting deep shots. They were hitting underneath and moving the ball.
Ole Miss was running wild and free like a teenager on spring break. Like I've never seen anything like that in the secondary.
Like an Amish teenager on Rumspringa?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, I actually watched that show, by the way, and I really enjoyed it.
Of course you did.
I don't remember what it was called, but like I was like fascinated. I am fascinated by that stuff. Yeah, like sitting up in the press box, there were at least 6 plays in that game where Ole Miss threw to a receiver that had 10 yards of room around him in every direction. And I don't know if that was coverages or if it was just really well-designed pre-snap motions. Like there's all these
Kirby's
things.
philosophy when playing this kind of offense, and remember Ole Miss and Tennessee's offenses are based on the old Baylor Art Briles offense. Kirby's philosophy has always been keep everything in front of you. Like don't get beat deep. And it's worked really well, because what you do is you just tackle that. Usually you're just tackling the guy when he catches the ball, and he's catching the ball 6 yards down the field. So on first down, they throw for 6 yards. You tackle him. They try to run on second down. You stuff them for a gain of 1. So you get 3rd and 3. They throw the same pass. Maybe the guy drops it. Maybe the quarterback's off. Maybe the DB makes a play, and all of a sudden you force a 3 and out. Like that's how Georgia would beat this offense in the past. But you saw them have to give some cushion because Ole Miss's receivers are so good. I don't know if Tennessee's receivers are as good as Ole Miss, but we'll find out.
I also don't think that this game is anything like the game 2 years ago where Georgia just swallowed them whole. Like I don't think
Georgia's offense was so much better
is. Yeah. So I think that there's this thought of like, well, Tennessee was really good 2 years ago and they went and played Georgia. And then they played in a 2-possession game that felt like insurmountable since the beginning of the first quarter. Like Tennessee just got mauled. Like, I don't think that's on the table here. So if that's what you're thinking a Kirby game is, like, I am not on board with that.
All right, Ari. That is your Tennessee Georgia preview presented by Prize Picks. Download that app. Use that code Staples. Play $5. Get $50 instantly.